For joining me on this historic day. A lot of the discussion after the resounding yes vote was announced immediately turned to politics and how and when a same-sex marriage bill will make it through the federal parliament. Before we analyse all of that though, and we will, it's important to remember that today is not about politicians. At heart, it's about ordinary Australians, some of whom have fought for decades for equal rights and some of whom are coming of age just as that fight clears one of its final hurdles. Andy Park was there the moment one couple heard the news they've been hoping for.
I would say this. We know that there's a lot of people out there. 15 years ago, most of the people that will vote yes today probably would have voted no.
So when you woke up this morning, what was the first thing that you said to each other?
I think I asked him, how do you sleep and is he nervous? And the answer was crap and yes. We try not to get as worked up for a positive vote, because if it's a no, that'll completely shatter us. So we've got that reserved excitement. I think is the best way to describe it. But nervous as hell.
Michael Wynne and Sean Towner have more at stake than most. It's less than 2 months until their wedding day.
I think, like all of us here, I don't know what to feel yet. We'll know in a few moments. I'm in a weird state of suspended animation. But I look at all of you beautiful, amazing people, and there is no way that we can lose, because we are a strong, loving community. So all of us will pull together.
Hi Michael, how are you feeling?
I called this media conference to announce the result.
And Michael's mum is waiting on the phone to hear the result from Kim.
I'm very nervous. I can't imagine how you're feeling. I'm wearing a heart necklace to hope that that's good luck.
As possible to participate in the voluntary survey.
It's a very emotional time for a parent to watch your child get married.
Michael's family are the Wynnes, whose hearts were fullest watching their other son, Andrew, marry in 2015.
It was just a great day amongst all their friends. A beautiful couple, so very, very happy with Andrew and his choice of a beautiful wife, Melissa. So no, very, very happy they're made for each other.
One of the highlights for me was my brother's speech during the wedding. Talked about the importance of love. And you know, that's the reason that we got married, and you know, that's the reason that everyone wants to get married.
Andrew's baby brother, Michael, has been with his partner, Sean, for 4.5 years. On that day when you watched your brother get married, was there any sense of bittersweetness?
They read, marriage is between a man and a woman, and then Andrew and Melissa said that that's what they had to say at their wedding, but they believed that marriage could be for any two people who are in love. So it was really nice that at their wedding they acknowledged that, me as their brother and anyone else in the crowd and beyond, they believe that they should, have the same rights as them.
I always knew I was going to ask Ron for his blessing to marry Mike, and I always thought that, I'm generally a fairly self-confident kind of guy, and I thought I'll breeze in there and I'll have a chat and it'll all be fine.
I still remember the day he actually came and said, I'd like to marry Michael, and sort of took me back a step, and I went, oh, right, because I was rushing off to work. So, yes, that was my one word to him. I said, if you're going to be committed to Michael, I'm more than happy for you to ask him to marry him.
Michael and Sean are very much in love, and just like Andrew and Melissa, it'd be lovely if they could formalise their love for each other by being able to marry legally in Australia.
Michael and Sean have their hearts set on a February wedding.
God, he wants glitter cannons and doves.
We're definitely having glitter cannons. We're not having a same-sex wedding without a bit of flair that only a gay man can bring. But we've done the florist, we've done the food, we've got suits to organise, and our bucks, and I think that's almost it.
All the while, the campaign for and against same-sex marriage has been fought.
Well, for the last 3 months, there is no way that I would ever click on comments on a news article or, see the replies on any tweet to do with this debate, because I know myself, and if I read any of those kind of derogatory cruel words, I know how it would affect me, even though it's coming from a faceless stranger who can't put, their name to their words. Any of that kind of language just really takes me back to being, a 13-year-old boy.
So now to the final count of participation. It shows how important this issue is to many Australians.
I can't keep going through this.
Participation was strong across all ages, with all age groups having higher than 70% participation, and slightly lower for younger age groups, but not markedly so. Around 70% for 3 and over 50% for the remaining 1. The national result, yes responses, 7,817,000. Representing 61.6%.
61%. It's a
61.6% of clear responses.
It's wonderful, Michael. Sean, it's fantastic. Congratulations. Oh, wonderful. It's just wonderful news. I'm so thrilled. Sean, it's fantastic. Congratulations. Oh, wonderful. It's just wonderful news. I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled. Australia, we can be proud of our country now.
We're getting married! I love you.
Sean, you were more emotional than I expected that you would be. How do you feel?
Oh, emotionally drained, happy, excited, relieved. I can marry this man in February.
One of the federal parliament's staunchest campaigners for many years for equal rights for LGBTQI Australians has been Queensland Liberal National Party MP Warren Entsch. He was in New York this morning when news of the vote broke.
For the national result, yes responses, 7 million. Yes. 8 representing 61.6%. It gives me great pleasure to return these results back to the community today. Ultimately, the strong participation by the Australian public and their clear responses to the survey have delivered this quality information back to the community.
Warren Entsch, you've worked for this for a very long time.
2004, I was just reflecting, 13 years. How good is this? I mean, it's just fantastic, and it's taken us all this time to get it, but you can hear and you can see. I mean, here, even in New York, we've got a room full of people, Australians and New Yorkers are all celebrating. I mean, this is not just something that's being celebrated in Australia, this has been celebrated around the world.
How quickly do you think that a same-sex marriage bill can get up?
Oh, it's got to be done before. I mean, I really appreciated the fact, listening to the Prime Minister a moment ago, he made a commitment. It will be done before Christmas. We've got 2 weeks of sitting. We will have same-sex marriage legislated, and people will be able to get married, irrespective of their gender, before the end of the year. I think this is a Christmas present to all Australians.
How concerned are you that MPs in the no camp may try to derail the process by moving every exemption and amendment under the sun?
I don't think that that's going to happen. I mean, I seen what was happening with Senator Patterson's bill. I think the response that we got, overwhelming response, over 60%, 61 point something percent, you know, 2/3 of Australian public have just said, yes, let's do this. And I think that there is zero appetite for some sort of playing silly buggers, if you like, or kicking the can down the road. I think they want it done. They want it done now. Prime Minister's committed that we do it before Christmas. Let's make it happen. And I think that you'll find the overwhelming majority of Australians want it that way. We've got a bill here. If they want to put up some amendments, they can do that. We've already dealt with religious exemptions, etc. If they want to go further, let them have a go at it, test it on the floor of the Parliament, and we'll see how it stands up.
What has been the cost to the LGBTQI community of this process?
Oh, look, I think the costs have been quite significant. I mean, I've been talking with the LGBT community now in many ways now as the chair, one of the co-chairs of the Parliamentary Friendship Group on the LGBTI community. And you know, you can see the impact that it's had, the fact that they feel very strongly that they feel that they are not treated as other Australians. I think that the impact has been quite profound. But I think the decision that was made today, and if we move quickly on this and implement this, I think will be very much part of the healing process. But not only for the LGBTI community, but I think you'll find very quickly that Australians, even those that had voted no in this process, will wake up and say, well, wait a minute, you know, they'll realise that the world moves on and they'll start to feel really good about themselves.
Warren Entsch, thanks very much for letting us interrupt your celebration. We'll let you get back to it. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you back in Australia. I'll be back in about a week and a half, and I'm looking on there for the last 2 weeks to be part of the debate. But thank you very much for having me on your program.
Malcolm Turnbull's promise of legalising same-sex marriage before Christmas is on firm ground. Such was the scale of the victory for the Yes camp. Now, even the most fierce opponents in Parliament have promised to get out of the way to allow the legislation to pass. But as political correspondent David Lipson reports, there's still a lengthy debate over legal protections to come.
Inside Parliament House, as a moment in history drew near, MPs and senators huddled around TVs and came together in cross-party groups. The result, when it came, was emphatic.
Yes responses, 7,817,247, representing 61.6% of clear responses.
Emotions overflowed. As a long and at times bruising campaign ended in relief and elation for long-time campaigners of same-sex marriage.
Thank you, Australia. Thank you for standing up for fairness. Thank you for standing up for equality.
I've never been more proud to stand up and represent Australian people than I was this morning when I listened to that result.
If you can't get emotional over an issue like this, I mean, Australians have said we want you to change the country.
The Prime Minister back from overseas just in time to receive the news.
The Australian people have spoken in their millions, and they have voted overwhelmingly yes.
Yes! 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 So when's the wedding? Liberal MP Tim Wilson and his partner Ryan have been engaged for 9 years.
When that result came in, and to see the pictures of people in Melbourne and Sydney, and I'm sure elsewhere, sort of celebrating, it's a very special day.
Sheer joy, and obviously my love for Ryan, but it was the scale of the result.
Down the corridor, it's a very different mood in the office of no campaigner Corey Bernardi.
All right, I'm over him. Let's turn him off and get back to work.
Green tea, not champagne, the drink of choice after a clear defeat.
There's always a lesson to be learned in everything. And, you know, how not to gloat in victory is one that seems to have been lost on a number of people.
You're getting a few emails, eh?
Yeah, you know, Mr. James Walsh, thank you. That's not how you spell Corey.
What's he said?
I wouldn't repeat it on television.
The Australian Conservative senator is one of a group of like-minded parliamentarians now focused on the 38% of Australians who voted no.
And I did say many years ago that if a majority of people in a majority of states, you know, voted in favour of a particular course of action, who am I to stand in the way of that? And that's precisely what's happened. I still won't support the bill, but nonetheless, you know, it says that we didn't have the numbers, and numbers is everything.
The numbers in Parliament will ensure the Marriage Act is changed to allow all couples to legally marry, but first get set for a lengthy debate over legal protections for conscientious objectors. There is now just one bill in play. Senator James Paterson has dropped his rival proposal and will instead seek to toughen up the bill put forward by fellow Liberal Dean Smith. That means the starting point is to shield from prosecution religious ministers and religious celebrants who refuse to take part in same-sex weddings, with any further protections decided by a free vote in Parliament.
And that means that members of the coalition can vote on the bill, whichever way their conscience tells them to vote, and on amendments. And they can move whatever amendments they wish. And there will no doubt be a very lively debate.
Personally, I believe that the Smith bill will need some improvements.
Already the amendments have begun, the Attorney-General moving to add protections for civil celebrants and anyone else expressing their religious views on the subject of marriage.
I move that the following bill be introduced. A bill for an act to amend the law relating to the definition of marriage and protect religious freedoms and for related purposes.
The bill will be listed for consideration at the time for private senators' bills tomorrow. Thank you.
Now the bill is in motion, even the staunchest opponents dare not stand in the way.
I am not going to vote against this. I am not going to frustrate the will of the public.
If you haven't got the numbers, you cannot stop it.
Can people be absolutely confident that this will be done by Christmas?
I'll be voting to keep the Parliament going until this bill is done, including if it takes us all the way up to Christmas.
Now it is up to us, here in the Parliament of Australia, to get on with it. To get on with the job the Australian people have tasked us to do and get this done this year before Christmas. That must be our commitment.
The Prime Minister has kept his promise to give Australians a say, and he's got the result he wanted. But it's unclear if he'll reap much political reward after a process many felt was expensive and unnecessary. On the other hand, Bill Shorten initially resisted the postal survey, yet 4 out of every 5 voters took part. And now Labor has a potential headache in a bunch of ethnically diverse Western Sydney seats, which emphatically voted no. Arguably, the biggest winners politically are those on the fringe, like Get Up for the Yes camp, and Conservative stalwarts like Corey Bernardi, who now have a treasure trove of data to use in their ongoing raid on voters fed up with the major parties. So is this the end of your campaign?
Oh gosh, no. This is the end of the beginning, but it's only the beginning of the rest of the campaign. I mean, I think we are in a battle for some of the building blocks and foundations of Western civilisation.
Others are just glad their battle for equality is almost won.
It's quite taxing, frankly, having to live your life on a national stage to achieve a change in the law that so many people have resisted at different points. And we actually need to celebrate by ourselves and just go and recognise that, like a lot of other people, we've been part of it.
Obviously, we invited the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, to join 7:30 this evening to discuss this important day for Australians. He has instead left the space to the man who's pursuing his job and ahead in the polls, Opposition Leader Bill Shorten. Bill Shorten, Warren Entsch's view is that there's zero appetite in the community for politicians to play silly buggers on this anymore. Is he right?
He's spot on. I mean, a lot of us think that spending $122 million to do another survey is probably an example of unnecessary delay, but what's done is done. I promise Australians that Labor will be supporting resolution through the Senate and the House of Representatives before Parliament rises on about December the 6th, December the 7th.
The bill that Dean Smith is going to put forward, which looks like the bill that's going to be debated, would Labor be proposing any particular amendments to that? And do you have any concerns about issues to do with freedom of religion or freedom of speech?
Well, I think this afternoon Penny Wong has become one of the co-sponsors of the Smith bill. The Smith bill was the result of a cross-party parliamentary committee. In other words, this bill is already a compromise bill to amend the Marriage Act to allow same-sex marriage. I don't see the case as made for massive amendments. There might be 1 or 2 technical matters which, if people have, make the point well, then we need to clarify. But no, I think fundamentally we know what the law change is required to look like. We've got this cross-party bill, so no, I'm not in the brigade for having a lot of changes at this stage. Let's just get it done.
And do you see any potential barriers to getting this bill through by the end of the parliamentary year? It's
only if people in the Conservative Party try and delay it and say that somehow having marriage equality offends religious freedom. So there might be delaying tactics, but the mood of the nation won't tolerate it. I actually think most of the nation can't understand why we haven't dealt with it already. But I can guarantee people who participated in the survey that the vast, vast majority of Labor MPs will be voting yes and be voting to get the marriage equality legislation sorted in the remaining 2 weeks of House of Representatives Parliament sitting time.
On that point, how many Labor MPs do you think will vote for same-sex marriage on the floor of the Parliament?
Well, it's a matter of conscience within the Labor Party. We have about 96 Labor MPs across the Senate and the House of Reps. I think it'll be around 90 will vote yes. It could be a couple more, could be a couple less. We have a conscience vote, though, and I respect that. But let's be really clear for Australians who are trying to work out, will these laws pass? Labor will decisively, in very big numbers, be voting for marriage equality. And I think if the Liberals finally allow a conscience vote of their own side, those votes, those Liberal conscience votes plus Labor's votes, plus, of course, smaller parties, that'll create an overwhelming force for change.
Do you think this is the final hurdle for LGBTQI Australians to have full equality in Australia? Is there anything left after this?
This is certainly, I think, the biggest remaining hurdle. You'd have to speak to members of the community about other particular matters they might have in mind. But I do think this is the missing link. I wanted to say about this survey that I really respect LGBTIQ Australians, what they've had to endure in this campaign. They didn't ask for this survey because what effectively the survey was asking millions of Australians to judge the relationships of their fellow Australians, the legitimacy of it. Now, what is good is that 61% of Australians have said yes. So the Australian people, when asked, have come up trumps. And now I think it's up to the Parliament to do our job. As I said at the State Library of Victoria today to thousands of people, today we celebrate, tomorrow we legislate.
When you look at the no vote, the seats with the highest no vote are all Labor. You know, Tony Burke's seat, Watson, Jason Clare's Blaxland, Chris Bowen's McMahon, Ed Husick's seat of Chifley. Does that tell you anything about the values of people in the Parliamentary Labor Party versus the values of people that you represent in some of these very safe Labor electorates?
No, it just tells me that the Labor Party represents seats with people from various backgrounds. I have quite a religious seat myself in Maribyrnong in Melbourne's northwest. About 42% of my seat are Catholics, and I think about 84% of them express a belief in some God or deity. No, I just think it shows the Labor Party represents a diverse range of working Australians. But when it comes to marriage equality, that's Labor's policy. We have a conscience vote in this Parliament. And I think what we'll see is our MPs exercise their conscience and support party policy, which is equality for all.
Would you anticipate any blowback in those Labor seats against the sitting MPs on this issue?
No, I don't.
There's a by-election in the seat of Bennelong coming up. It returned a slight majority no vote as well. Is it realistic to think that what is largely a Conservative seat and has been a Conservative seat for much of its history would have any chance of going to Labor in this upcoming by-election?
Well, first of all, on the marriage equality survey, it was pretty finely balanced, 50.4 to 49.6 against and for. In terms of the by-election, we've managed to produce an excellent candidate, Christina Keneally. She's served New South Wales before. She's got a pretty distinguished public record in public life, and she's willing to serve again. We are behind the eight ball, so to speak. The Liberals won that seat at the last general election 60% to 40%. But what I admire about Christina is she's a fighter. She knows that at the moment the other fellow's probably ahead, but she's standing up because she wants to give the people of Bennelong the opportunity to send a message to the Turnbull government that people in Australia aren't happy with the way they're handling issues from power prices to housing affordability to penalty rates to a whole range of matters, healthcare cuts and school cuts.
Bill Shorten, thank you.
Thank you.
A private member's bill on same-sex marriage has already been introduced into the Senate, as Mr Shorten said, and debate is underway. With me now live from Parliament House in Canberra is Senator Mathias Cormann, one of the architects of the plebiscite. Senator, thanks very much for joining us. We heard you say in that story earlier that the Smith bill needs some improvements. What specifically would you like to see?
Well, I mean, that is obviously going to be the debate over the next few weeks. Tomorrow we will start the second reading debate. The amendments will only be debated in the week starting the 27th of November. So over the next week or so, there'll be the opportunity for people of goodwill from right across the Parliament to explore how we can ensure that appropriate religious protections are in place. All senior members of Parliament from all sides, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition and others, have said in the past that appropriate religious protections are important, and indeed they are, and that's going to be the conversation over the next week or so.
So you've been one of the leading proponents of the no vote. Can you give me a sense of what you think would be the sort of protection you'd like to see in it?
Well, actually, I haven't really taken an active role in this campaign because I was responsible for the process overall. I mean, my personal view was on the record, but I've also always said that I will act consistent with the verdict of the Australian people. Now, the verdict of the Australian people today was emphatic, and I will be voting yes. Now, there are a range of areas where I believe there is scope to explore whether the protections in the Smith Bill can be appropriately further improved, whether that is in relation to the protections for marriage celebrants, not just religious celebrants, but marriage celebrants generally, the whole area of protecting freedom of speech for people based on their religious views, and indeed the arrangements for religious charities. I mean, there are a range of areas where I think it is worthwhile to have a conversation, and I think the Smith Bill is a good starting position. We certainly now we must act to implement the wishes of the Australian people, but I think it is appropriate in the usual way for the Parliament to now assess that we ensure that the bill is as good as it possibly can be.
You're quite right. I should have been clearer in my language about your position on the no. Can I check then? You've said you'll vote yes. If the amendments that you are seeking don't get through, will you still vote yes?
Well, I will vote for the bill. But I will also, I mean, as I've said to people, I will now engage with colleagues to explore what amendments might be able to achieve a consensus across the Parliament. Every individual member is able to initiate and move amendments, but in the end, amendments will only get up if they secure majority support. But in the end, I will be supporting the bill to change the law to allow same-sex couples to marry, yes.
And how do you see this unfolding in terms of time frame? Do you share the confidence of others that it can be resolved by Christmas?
Yes, I do. So the motion that was passed unanimously by the Senate today essentially ensured that tomorrow we would start the second reading debate. Should the second reading debate finish tomorrow, we will then adjourn the debate so that the debate on amendments will only start in the week of the 27th of November. And that whole week, that whole first sitting week of the final sitting fortnight has been earmarked for debate in the Senate, extended sitting hours on the Tuesday, and if the consideration of the legislation hasn't been finalised by the end of Thursday, the 30th of November, then we will continue to sit until it is finally dealt with.
Do you accept that there's been a cost to LGBTQI Australians in going through this plebiscite process?
I said at the beginning of this process that this would be a unifying moment for the nation. I believe that's true. The truth is that there are good people on both sides of this argument who have strong and sincerely held views. The only way to resolve these sorts of disagreements is through a ballot. That's what happened. The decision is emphatic, and I believe that people who were in favour or who are in favour of the status quo will find it easier to accept the change, which is a significant change, in particular for some. I think they'll find it easier to accept the change having been part of the decision-making process. And now that the decision has been made, I think the country can move on. There's obviously been an unresolved debate in Australia for some time, and I believe that this process has helped facilitate a more permanent resolution of this issue in a way that brings the country together.
Senator Cormann, always good to have you on the program. Thank you very much.
Always good to talk to you.
And that is the program for tonight. Thanks for your company. Good night.